time out of your schedules to join us tonight for a very important dialogue. I will introduce Mr. Rubenstein in a moment to talk about how this firm came together, but I'm really just a guest at John Ryan High School. The initiative of the administration of the building and guest staff, we really want to make sure we do some things this year that address substance abuse and some other difficult behaviors that we see our students engaging in. You are all here because you have not said to yourself, not my kid. It is dangerous when parents have the mindset to think that some of the dangers we face in society could not happen in their household. And just for being here and wanting to have more information and be part of a conversation about substance abuse prevention shows me that you understand that it impacts every household in our community. There's some powerful things to go through today. Show hands, some of you watched the video. About that a bit. But I have to tell you, I struggle to get through that too. Because you start to get into your own family, your own experience, in your own life. And I'm certain that everyone in this room has been impacted in one way or another by someone who has abused substance behavior. This will be a presentation for parents, students in 8th and 12th grade. We'll have presentations from LICADD and representatives of LICADD on Friday. We'll talk more about that at night.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out to hear about a very topical issue. Where did I land upon learning about LICADD? I'm part of the Suffolk County High School Principals Association, and really the goal of that organization is to network and share ideas and ways to better service our students academically, socially, and emotionally. And so at our most recent meeting in October, they brought in representatives from LICADD, and LICADD presented to the high school principals across Suffolk County about the opioid epidemic. And I believe, if I remember accurately, it is Bronx, Staten Island, and then Suffolk County that leads the nation in opioid overdoses. And so that is alarming in and of itself, and while we believe that many of our students, most of our students here in the LA School District are making good choices, we want them to continue to make good choices, and the best way to arm them with, or to provide them with the opportunity to make good choices is to arm them with information so they can make informed choices. At that meeting, the video that Dr. Bosser shared with you was shown to us, and it was very emotional. And I have to say, I too was holding back tears and was embarrassed. And so I looked around the room, and everybody was holding back tears. I immediately came back to the building. I spoke with Ms. Hart, our school psychologist, and I said, we have to do this. And I showed it to our PPS IST team and said, we need to do something about bringing this to high school. Ms. Hart really helped to organize bringing LICADD to you this evening. And I do believe in the value of tonight's presentation. I thank you all for coming out. And I again want to thank Ms. Hart for helping to organize. And without further ado, I'm going to present to our LICADD representative who's going to take over the presentation for tonight. Thank you, Lauren, for coming out. So thank you, everyone.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. A special thanks to Ms. Karch for putting this together. I'm so happy to be here tonight, and I'm so thankful that all of you are here to really share this really important information. So my name is Lauren Navarra, and I'm a licensed social worker from LICADD, the Long Island Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. LICADD is a small nonprofit that's been helping people across the island for over 62 years. So our primary office is in Westbury, off of Old Country Road, and we also have an office in Hop Up off of Motor Parkway. And basically what we do is we help anybody struggling with any type of substance abuse, mental health, or related issue, whether that be short-term, individual, and group counseling in our offices. We do not take insurance or sliding scales, so we see many people, mostly adolescents, free of charge on a weekly basis, which is really awesome. If there's any financial constraint, we do not want that to deter or prevent anybody from getting treatment. So by all means, LICADD is definitely here as a community resource. or whether it be referrals to treatment. So in addition to the counseling that we have on site, we also are mostly a referral-based agency. So we have connections to treatment providers across the island as well as out of state. Whether somebody calls us or comes into our office and they're looking for, let's say, a private doctor or psychotherapist, maybe they need a detox or inpatient program, we can help make those connections. In addition to the services that we provide, our office is open Monday to Saturday. However, you can reach a licensed clinician 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is really amazing. Our office numbers will be at the end of the presentation, and I really encourage all of you to just take down the number. Right? You never know when you might find yourself, or maybe your child in a crisis situation. We might not know the best way to help them. So please, by all means, take down those numbers. If I could just explain my role really quickly with LICADD, because I think it's really important for all of you to know. I'm the SAP, the Student Assistance Program Coordinator. So I coordinate with over 102 schools across the island. We roughly speak to 30 to 40,000 students every year on topics just like this. So I'm going to be doing the vaping talk, or the new trends talk, as we like to call it, on Friday for the 8th to 12th grade. But in addition to new trends, we talk about all aspects related to well-being. So we talk about mindfulness, anxiety, coping, other mental health concerns. And I just mention that because I feel like I'm in a very unique position with my job. I really have access to so many students, and we really have really great conversations. They're very honest and upfront and forthcoming with what they're seeing in school, what they're seeing around their community, and kind of the behaviors that their friends maybe are engaging in. So it really allows for me to get really great insight into what's going on around the school systems. So today we're going to be talking about, as I mentioned, kind of the new trends in substance use that we're seeing, with particular regard to vaping. As I mentioned, we're in over 100 schools across the island, and I can safely say that every school district that we are in currently has some type of vaping problem. Right? So this is very important that you all are here, as I mentioned, to really get this informative information so that we can continue to engage our kids. Right, it should, if I may say so, right, and let me preface this by saying I'm not a parent. I think it's one of the most difficult jobs, so again, hats off to you all. But if I may say so, I think it's really important to not only start a conversation, but to continue a conversation. Right, prevention is the #1 key to preventing or reducing substance use and subsequent dependence, right, or addiction to drugs and alcohol. So we want to really reinforce that within our children, right? It's definitely reinforced in the school system, the idea of prevention and continuing education, but ideally it will be an ongoing conversation with you and your kids. If anybody has any questions, by the way, at all, any comments, please just raise your hand. We can make this maybe an interactive conversation. I think it would be better. So just a couple of statistics for you all. As we probably all know, we are currently in the opiate epidemic. Right? We are in a very hot time in terms of the drug climate currently, and it seems to be affecting Long Island very much so, and the surrounding areas. So in 2016, Suffolk County was actually the highest county in all of New York State for opiate overdose death rate. So more people died in Suffolk than anywhere else in New York. Bronx and Staten Island were 2 and 3 respectively, and Nassau was #4. So based just on that statistic alone, we can really kind of understand the scope or the severity of the problem. As of 2018, if we compare the numbers from November 2016 to November 2018, it seems like the numbers are slightly declining. So as a treatment provider, right, we're very hopeful, but we have to kind of take this with a grain of salt because we're not really sure how the trend will continue. This could be for several reasons. This could be because more people are aware of the epidemic and they're kind of taking precautions for themselves and the people that they care about. This could be as a result of more people being trained in Narcan, right, or naloxone. Naloxone or Narcan is the antidote for opiate overdose. So if you give that to somebody that has overdosed, you can revive them potentially and bring them back to life. So there's not really a general cause and effect, but as I mentioned, the numbers are going down, so we're hopeful. And I mention this because nobody wakes up and says, today's the day I'm going to decide to take an opiate painkiller, right? Or today's the day I'm going to become addicted to opiates, whether illegal like heroin or legal like pharmaceutical grade opiates that we see, such as Vicodin, Percocet, Oxycontin, and things like that. There's a progression or a natural course as to what substance takes on an individual. So in the beginning of the progression, we see abstinence, which is no substance use whatsoever, no tobacco, alcohol, or drug use. And then this could turn into infrequent use, which I also like to conceptualize as social use or experimental use. So let's say when we talk about this progression, we're talking about alcohol. But with this progression, we really can talk about any combination of drugs, 1 drug, 5 drugs, 10 drugs, it really doesn't matter. So when we first start experimenting with alcohol, we might do it very infrequently, maybe once a month, once every couple of months. And at that point, that substance is not taking over that individual's life. So it's really not considered to be problematic use. But over time, our tolerance increases the amount that we need to feel the desired effects. So we need to increase the amount we drink, so more than 1 to 2 drinks, as well as the frequency, so more than once a month or once every couple of months. And if somebody's really not mindful or conscious of how much they're using, they can get into an abusive pattern with substances. And when we kind of assess in our office to see how severe somebody's substance use disorder is, we look to 6 life areas. And I'm just going to name them for you really quickly because I think it's important to kind of get a general idea of what we're talking about and how this could be manifested or displayed within our kids. So physical health. Your kid was really physically active, or we're really physically active. Now all of a sudden we've gained a lot of weight, lost a lot of weight. Something is going on there. Our mental health, our mental stability, right? Your kid was always really happy, nothing bothered them too much. You know, normal life stresses, but we get over them. Now all of a sudden your child is extremely depressed all the time, extremely anxious, they're very irritable, right? Something is changing with regard to their personality. Their relationships, right? How well they function with you at home, with their friends, with their peers at school. Education and vocation, so A student becomes the D student, or a kid that would always show up for work and be on time and be very conscientious at work is not showing up, they're calling in sick, things like that. Financial, right? Because drugs and alcohol cost money, how are we affording this? And lastly, craving, right? Sometimes when we think of craving, we can consider it as psychological dependence. Forgive me, I'm terrible at analogies, but I think it's helpful to kind of get a better idea of what I'm talking about. I like to use the News 12 analogy. What happens when you watch News 12 for like 30 minutes at a time? It's going to repeat, right? Very repetitive. We're going to see the same stories every 10, 15, 20 minutes or so. And that's quite literally how an individual's brain is operating when they're experiencing a craving. They cannot be present, mind and body in their day because their brain is solely focused on acquiring the drug, getting high, feeling how that drug feels for them. Right? So a student can be physically present in class, but their mind is off thinking about when the period's going to end, for example, so they can go outside or go on a break to hit their friend's vape or something like that. Right? This is the reality for a lot of young people. So generally, the more life areas that are impacted, generally speaking, the worse somebody is in terms of this progression. So generally speaking, if we see more life areas, that could be constituted or considered like a dependence. And we don't want to wait until somebody is dependent or addicted to drugs or alcohol to get help for them. If we even see one change in a life area, right, that could be an early warning sign or an early indication that something is not right. And as I mentioned, I can only speak for what we do at LICADD, but LICADD can really help an individual at any step of the way. Whether they're just kind of socially using substances, right? Maybe it's not a full-blown problem at that point, but we know that it can get to a problem, LICADD can help. Right? Or whether we know that our kid has a problem, right? All of these life areas are impacted and they're very overwhelmed because of their substance and what their substance has done to their life. We can also come in. So generally speaking, right, as I mentioned, the earlier we acknowledge these warning signs, the better the outcome. I'm just going to take a minute. I apologize for those of you who saw the PSI, we're going to show it again, but for those of you who have not seen it, LICADD and one of our volunteers created a public service announcement this summer that really highlights this progression so well. And I just want to mention that this is not a dramatization by any means, although it can seem that way for somebody maybe who doesn't have a personal connection, let's say, with substance abuse or use. But it's definitely very emotionally charged. So I just want to let everybody know that before we show it.
Can we name her Chloe?
You want to name her Chloe?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Hello, Chloe. Faster! I said faster, Mommy.
Let go, baby. Hold on. Charlie, breakfast.
Coming.
Hello, sweetie.
Good morning. Charlie, stop eating Chloe pancakes. See you later. Stop.
Congratulations, Charlie.
That's it, man. That's it.
Stop it!
These, Charlie?
Come on, Charlie, this isn't like you.
Charlie, what are you doing here?
You remember that? Yes. Yeah, okay.
Charlie?
Yeah, it's all set. What the hell is this, Charlie?
Please, Charlie, it hurts. Charlie, Charlie.
Hey, Charlie, wake up. You're gonna be late. Charlie? Charlie? No, 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 no! You might have sent this overdose there. I don't know. He's not breathing. He's not breathing. Help! Please help me! Don't let go, Charlie. Don't let go. Hold on.
Definitely very intense, as I mentioned, very emotionally charged. Unfortunately, I wish that this was a really dramatic reenactment, right? But that the sad reality for a lot of people, especially a lot of young people. And we kind of saw Charlie digressing, if you will. We kind of saw each of those life areas being impacted. So if I could please just give you some tips, I guess, if you will, and really just be hyper aware. If you already are, just be extra hyper aware of what your kids are doing, who they're speaking with, who they're engaging with, who maybe they're not engaging with, to try to prevent something like this from happening. When we consider substance use, we really have to look at the teen brain. Right? Our brain stops really developing around our mid-20s, about 25. New research can come out and saying that our brain doesn't stop developing until we're closer to 30. But this is the frontal lobe, the lobe that's responsible for saying stop and think about what you're doing before you do it. Right? Weigh the consequences of your action, kind of pros and cons list before we just react impulsively. But this part of the brain is not developed in our adolescent children. So the way I like to consider the brain is like it's a car with a brick on the gas pedal and no brake. So a car that's operating like that is not going to stop for stop signs, stop lights, consider pedestrians or anybody else in the area for that matter. It's just going to go, go, go. Right? And we need to understand this, in terms of how our children operate, right, and their decision-making capacity, because this is quite literally how their brain is developing, right? It's totally normal. It's okay that their brain is not fully developed and they're acting impulsively, because that's just the nature of how we naturally grow, develop, and operate, if you will. But if we consider substance use with the teen brain, right, and the idea of we want to maximize pleasure and do anything to avoid pain, we might get into risky substance use for a couple of reasons, right? If we consider the one side of we want to do everything to maximize our pleasure, we might partake in substance use because initially at first drugs make us feel good, right? That's why people partake in substance use. And if we weigh the other side of the coin, right, we want to do everything to avoid pain, maybe just general life stress is too much for us. Maybe we're going through some extra stuff at school, at home, with our mental health, or a combination of the three, right? And if we don't have healthy coping skills or healthy outlets to get through whatever life's adversity that we're experiencing at the moment, we're going to turn to substance, because we do not know how to regulate our emotions or regulate our experiences, if you will. So we're just going to turn to substances to just totally eliminate how we feel. But the problem with this is if we are using now to cope, right, as a coping skill, because substance is absolutely a coping skill, just not a healthy one, if you will. As we get older and our life stress is compounded, we're going to turn to the same thing, right, substance use. And besides working with adolescents, I also work with older adults, right, people who are 40 and 50 years old to have the brain development, if you will, of an adolescent, right? They started using substance to cope with life as an adolescent. And today now, right, 30, 40 years later, they have the emotional regulation, the impulse control, let's say, of an adolescent teen. Right? So ideally, we want to postpone or delay substance use as long as possible. And we really want to reinforce this with our kids. Average age of first use in our country, 11 to 13. By all means, not every 11, 12, and 13-year-old is out there using substances, but this is the age that we first become curious or come in contact with substances. Right, and as we talk about the teen brain, right, from 11 till 25, over 10 years of brain development. So we really want to postpone substance use as long as possible. And that also, by postponing substance use, we decrease our chances of developing an addiction to substances by a large percent. I apologize, I don't have the exact statistics, but using at a young age puts us much more at risk for developing an abusive pattern or an addiction to substances later on. Kind of because of what I just mentioned in terms of the brain development and just our ability to cope with life, if you will. Just a little information in terms of laws and regulations for parents. Social host law. Just a show of hands, how many people are familiar with social host? Okay, good. Most of you. Awesome. Basically, what this law says is anybody that's over 18, whether that be a sibling, a homeowner, a parent, a guardian, right, they are responsible for the kids underage in that home. So let's say you decide to go out for the night, right? Your kids know that, and they decide to have a party. Unfortunately, you can still be held liable for something like that, even if you weren't in the home. Right? There was a situation a couple of years ago in Dix Hills. I'll just name a couple because I feel like it's very relevant and very important. So the parent let the kid have a graduation party. He was a senior in high school, graduated, had like 200 people at the house. The parents got 200 counts of the social host law because somebody got hurt. They fell off the deck and broke something in their back or their neck or something like that. So they got a count for every person at that party. The last I heard, we kind of had an update with the family. Unfortunately, they lost their house because of the legal fees that they incurred as a result of this charge. Another situation that we've heard of most recently, siblings, right? The sister went away to college, she came home for break, her younger brother was having a party and she had no idea that this was going on, right? She was upstairs, the kids were in the basement. Again, somebody got hurt, somebody got alcohol poisoning. Unfortunately, the sister lost her scholarship to the school because she was held liable, because she was over 18. I believe she was 21 at the time. So even though she had no idea that this was going on, right, she wasn't the parent, she was considered the guardian at the time in terms of how they see her in the law. So she was actually charged with social host. So it's not even enough to just charge the parents. Any older siblings could also be liable for something like this. And I just say that to make you all aware. Right? Sometimes the perception is if it's going on in my house, I have control over it, so it's safer than if my kid is at their friend's house or something like that. right? But we still have to challenge that notion with social host. Any questions related to this? Another law more so relevant for students, but absolutely important for you all, is the Good Samaritan law. I make sure that whenever I go to a school, I educate students on this, really regardless of the topic, because it's so important and it's so relevant. So this law basically says that if underage kids are at a party, they're using illegal drugs and alcohol, and somebody needs medical attention, everybody at the party has a moral, really, or ethical responsibility to call 911 or to get help for that person. Doesn't necessarily have to be 911, it could be a parent or guardian. But God forbid anything happens to the child thereafter, nobody is held responsible or liable. And to take it a step further, no child or no adolescent will be held liable for any illegal drug or alcohol activity going on at the party. And this law was really created so that to encourage kids to call 911 or to get medical attention or to get an adult for a friend that needed help. Right? We know the slogan, if you see something, say something. That's kind of where they got this from. Because what was happening before is adolescents would go to a party, right? Somebody would get sick and they would be scared because they didn't want to get in trouble from mom or dad, didn't want to get in trouble from the cops, so they would just drop the friend off on the front lawn of their parents' house, for example, or take them to the hospital, but drop them off at the sidewalk of the hospital and drive away so that no one would see them associated. But still, kids were having really negative repercussions as a result of this. So really encourage you to continue, if you will, to educate your kids on this. Very, very important. So we're going to get into a little bit about marijuana. So the marijuana that most kids are smoking today is very different from maybe the marijuana that maybe some of us have dabbled in, right? Or the marijuana from even before our time, right? There's a cannabinoid or chemical in marijuana called THC. So when we think about how marijuana gets us high or produces those psychoactive effects, it's the concentration of THC. So it's not necessarily how much marijuana they're smoking, it's the amount of THC in the marijuana. So previous marijuana had a very low THC concentration. This marijuana, we can kind of consider it like a genetically modified marijuana, where growers can introduce how little or how many chemicals they want into the marijuana plant. So it's very genetically engineered. It's not even typically being grown in the ground anymore. It's being grown in a hydroponic system like you see above. Basically a water-based tank with many plants, and growers can introduce how little or how many chemicals they want in the plant via this piping. Just some food for thought. Right prior to LICADD, I worked at a treatment agency where individuals would have to be drug tested, right, to prove that they were remaining clean, if you will, for lack of a better word. I hate the word clean, but because it relates to dirty. Anyway, they had to prove their abstinence, if you will. That's a better word. And 2 adolescent boys in the course of like a year and a half that I worked with, I knew they only smoked marijuana. That's what they were there for, their initial charge. But when I drug tested them initially, their test came back positive for very, very trace amounts of cocaine and methamphetamine. Right, and that's just 2 adolescents that I've worked with. I'm not saying by any means that every marijuana out there is being laced with other drugs, but I've seen it with 2 different adolescents on 2 different occasions. So it's definitely something that is out there. Because we have to think about how the mind of a drug dealer works. Right? A drug dealer, are they going to give really weak stuff or very potent stuff? Very potent, right? Because they want to get you addicted. They want you to know that their stuff is the best, and they want you to go to them. They want to get you addicted on their stuff only. So they're going to make their drug of choice, whatever that may be, as highly potent or as strong as they possibly can. In addition to the high THC concentration of marijuana, we see another form of marijuana. It's a vaporized form of marijuana. So traditional marijuana, we know it's the plant form, right? It's a green leafy substance. This is a wax or oil. So it can come like this on a piece of paper, but I would say it's more generally found in a vape top similar to this one with the yellow in the middle. And they come individually packaged in states where it's legal. The wax ranges anywhere from a light yellow all the way to a brown color, and the consistency is kind of like a honey or molasses. So generally speaking, it's a little bit thicker than this nicotine-based vape juice that the kids are smoking, which we'll talk about in a little while. But the dangerous thing about this is the potency, right, the strength. So we already talked about the genetically modified marijuana, if you will, that's already very potent. This has 100% THC, right? So even a really strong strain of marijuana, it might have like a 60 or 70% THC maybe concentration. This is 100% pure THC. So you cannot get a stronger form of marijuana on the face of the earth today. One of the tricky things about detecting this type of marijuana is similar to the vape products, the nicotine-based vape products that kids are using. It's generally odorless, right? If it does have an odor, it smells like cotton candy, grape, blueberry, things like that. And in addition to that, the smoke dissipates very quickly. So somebody could quite literally be hitting a vape right now, and most of us wouldn't really have an idea, because that's how quickly the smoke dissipates or goes away. So some students are smoking this like they would traditional marijuana, without realizing that it's not equivalent, right? One hit of traditional marijuana and one hit of this wax or oil is not the same by any means. So we can approximate that about 1 to 2 hits of this is equal to about 1 joint. So again, if we think about maybe somebody who is, whether they're a regular smoker, whether they've never smoked marijuana in their life, if they're hitting something like this multiple times a day, they could quite literally be smoking multiple joints in a 1-day span, right? And what does that say about their chance for abuse and their chance of dependence? It makes that skyrocket, right? Exponentially increases their chance of abusing this or becoming dependent on something like this. Any questions about this marijuana? Yeah. So yeah, so this black thing up here is a torch that can be used to light something like this. So generally, like I said, if this wax is found, it's typically in a vape top like this. Much less commonly, it can be smoked in like a bong or something, like traditional marijuana can be smoked. But you can't light it with a regular lighter. I don't know if anyone has ever seen these giant like blowtorch like lighters. I don't know, just something that you can look out for in terms of paraphernalia, right? Because this marijuana, if it's being free-based or smoked out of a pipe or a piece, they can't use a regular lighter. So you want to look for these like giant blowtorch like lighters. I don't really know how else to explain it, but it kind of looks something like this. No, so this black piece is the lighter. So this glass piece would be the pipe that they're inserting the oil in. I would say 9 times out of 10, though, it's smoked through these vapor tops. That was a good question. Any other questions? Okay. In addition to the marijuana that we're seeing being vaped, we're also seeing, as I mentioned, these nicotine-based vape juices that are being vaporized. So these are all different kinds of vape products or vape paraphernalia, if you will. I would say if I had to say the most common one, it would be this device, the Juul. Also, another brand name for it is the Bow, but they all look the same. It's basically like a flash drive looking device. I would say this one is the most popular because it's the easiest to conceal, and the perception of risk for some reason with the Juul is lower than traditional vapes. But again, as I mentioned, any of these products can be used to smoke this nicotine-based vapor. So how the device works, or how any device generally works, there's a body to the device that contains the battery, right? I'm gonna kind of dissect the pieces because we need to understand all of the parts that make this whole thing extremely unhealthy. So the body of the device is where the battery is in. So first and foremost, we're smoking a battery-operated device, right? That's charged through USB or outlet. Second dangerous point, if you will, is this top. Right, the Juul is a little bit different than one of these, but again, it works in the same manner or mechanism. Right, the middle part contains the juice, and it also contains what's called an atomizer or a coil. So I'll get to the coil picture really quick. All right, I apologize. I don't know if I have it on here, but basically the coil is in the middle of the tank. Right, and the coil is what heats up the juice besides the battery. So the coil contains, it's mostly copper. Sometimes it's other metals like lead, tin, nickel, things like that. So we're first and foremost smoking the battery-operated device. This coil that's heating up the juice that's producing this vapor, there are nanoparticles from the juice that are being, from the atomizer from the coil that are being emitted into the juice. So the kids are not even smoking this really vague vape juice that are in these tops. They're smoking metal emissions that are coming from the coil. If you ever get a chance to go see a man named Dr. Dewey speak, I know he came to Elwood, which is really awesome. But if you can ever see him again, he's a really great guy. He's a neuroscientist and studies neuroimaging brain maps of adolescents that are addicted to drugs, kids as young as 9 years old. And he's studying kind of like the vape long-term effects, if you will. And he mentioned that the nanoparticles that are being emitted from this coil are going into the individual's bodies that are smoking them. But not only that, they cannot be broken down, or they cannot pass through the kidney and the liver. They're able to pass through the lungs, but not our filtration systems, right? Not our body's detoxification systems. So if our body's filtration systems are not working, right, our body is going to become unhealthy, right? These particles are actually able to build up in somebody's kidneys and livers. So he said it's only a matter of time until we see very young people with kidneys and liver problems or issues related to like chronic substance users, right? Like we see liver problems, for example, in older people with cirrhosis of the liver, right, that have been drinking excessively for decades of their life. We are going to probably see something similar to that of these vape products, right, because they're not able to be filtered out through our body. So I mentioned the vape juice very vaguely, but I'm going to go into it again. A pod, right, goes into this jewel. This is the jewel specifically, but a pod is equivalent to a bottle of vape juice, right? These pods just, or the jewel or the bow, this device just makes it more convenient so that you don't have to physically add the juice into your vape. So you buy these pods, comes in a pack of 4. Each of the different colors represents, I believe, a different flavor. But if you don't have the jewel, right, if let's say you have one of these devices, you might find a bottle of vape juice, right? It basically looks like a small glass bottle with a dropper. And usually it's labeled very carefully, if you will, right? It's labeled cotton candy, bubble gum. It really doesn't look harmful at all. Sometimes there will be no milligram of nicotine on the bottle. When I educate the students, I let them know that that by all means does not mean that there's no nicotine in that juice, right? I know of many people offhand that I've personally counseled, right, myself or my coworkers, that have unknowingly developed a nicotine addiction because of that exact reason, right? The perception of risk is so low. We see these vape products, we see these flavors, we think that they're very enticing, we want to try them, we become curious, and then we unknowingly develop an addiction to nicotine. Right? Because we have to go back to the fact that ideally these are created for people to stop smoking cigarettes, right? Even though they're not regulated. Ideally you would go from identified cigarette smoker to vape smoker, and they say if you're going to use it correctly, even though there's so many conflicting arguments out there about these vape products, you should use it for less than a year. So 6 months to a year is like the ideal time frame to go from vape smoker to non-smoker whatsoever, right? And this is a process too. If you were actually using this device to quit smoking, you would be mindful or aware of how many times you were hitting it, for example. Right? How much juice you're going through in a day span, in a week span. So you could titrate your level of nicotine down, ultimately, so that you become nicotine free. But we're seeing the exact opposite happening. Right? Things like this. Teenagers embrace Juul, saying it's discreet enough to vape and test. This is not even being smoked generally, I would say, by the young adult and adolescent population to quit smoking cigarettes, right? Because most of the adolescent population knows the long-term effects of cigarettes. They know that cigarettes cause cancer. We know the negative effects or the negative relationship between cigarettes and our health. But the same kids that are saying these things are unknowingly exposing themselves to large amounts of nicotine, right? If we think about the process somebody would have to go through to smoke a cigarette, let's say, could they smoke inside? No. We'd have to go outside, light the cigarette. We'd see it be smoked from start to finish. I don't know about any of you, but I don't know anyone that sits outside and chain smokes 20 cigarettes in one sitting, right? But if we apply that same principle to something like a Juul, right? One of these pods is equal to a whole pack of cigarettes. A pod is about this big. It's less than an inch wide, enough nicotine for a whole pack. And again, if we go back to that idea of like, looking at these similar or in the same manner as cigarettes, right? Nobody really is essentially sitting outside in one time frame to smoke a pack of cigarettes, but kids are quite literally smoking a whole Juul pod in one sitting, right? They're playing their video games, they keep that Juul in their mouth and they're not releasing it from their mouth quite literally until the whole pod is gone. And that can be smoked in, I've heard a whole jewel pod being smoked in a 40-minute period, in an hour period, in a couple hour period, right? Large amounts of nicotine. Again, sometimes more so than people would even smoke regular cigarettes. So we have to see these as still unhealthy, right? We can't see these as a healthy alternative to smoking, right? Because ideally, a healthy alternative to smoking would be no smoking whatsoever. This is really cool. This is from Nassau County Police Department. If you find a vape product in your house and you're unsure of what it is, because again, it could be hard to distinguish between what's THC oil, for example, and what's this nicotine-based oil, you can bring it to a local precinct and they have means to test it somehow. I'm not entirely sure how they do it, but definitely have referred some parents over to there. So by all means. Another resource is, of course, LICADD, right? We see this stuff all the time, so if you find a device and you're unsure, you can call us up at any time and we can help you kind of navigate it. Yeah, so this device is just an older, more old school form of a vape product. I would say when the vapes first became popular, they were making them more so like this. There are some people that still smoke devices like this. Generally speaking, the bigger mods is what they call them, which is like this kind of piece right here, relates to bigger billows of smoke. So some people are kind of like getting on this thing as like a trend, if you will, right? There's like this hashtag vape life, which a lot of kids are playing into, where they get these big devices and then they try to do all these tricks with the smoke. It's like the more smoke we can blow out, the better, right? The cooler that we are, the cooler that we look, if we can get more smoke or if we can do these smoke-related tricks. This is actually from the Juul website themselves. So they're actually being sued right now because of false advertising, right? And because they're realizing that thousands upon thousands of young people have become addicted to nicotine as a result of their products, right? What was supposed to be a smoking alternative, right, a safer smoking alternative, has become a gateway drug for many young people. People as young as 9. Right, my coworker, she's counseling, she helped a 9-year-old get to his pediatrician to get a nicotine patch because he unknowingly ingested that much nicotine and became addicted. So to find out more information about the Juul specifically, you can go on the Juul website. It's very comprehensive, so it actually breaks down each of the pieces. So like I said, the body of the device, basically the same thing now. The body of the Juul is the same thing as the body of this vaping device. What is a Juul pod? It goes exactly into it. The ingredients of the Juul pod, so I'll just read them really quickly. Propylene glycol, glycerin, nicotine, benzoic acid, and flavor, right? This really vague flavor. Another dangerous thing, this phenomenon called popcorn lungs. It's still kind of being studied, but basically it's like a fluid buildup in the lung. And a lot of young people are going to doctors with symptoms like intense asthma, right? Kids who would never have asthma or allergies before. And it's a direct result of being exposed to these vape products. Other chemicals that are found in vape products that are also found in cigarettes. What we're seeing with regard to vaping compared to cigarettes, right? With cigarettes, the risk is high. We have the long-term research. We know X causes Y or Y causes Z. So disapproval is high, right? So if risk and disapproval is high, the actuality or the percentage of use is going to be very low. But we're seeing the opposite happen with vapes, right? Risk is really low. We do not have that long-term research. We don't have enough data to definitively say these are definitely bad, right? We know that they're bad. We know that they're unhealthy. We know the research is going to come. We just don't have enough time under our belt. So disapproval is very low. So percentage of use or actuality of use is going to be much higher. So we get into why people use substances in the first place. As I mentioned in the beginning, oftentimes it's a coping mechanism, right? It's an unhealthy coping skill, but it absolutely is used as a coping skill, right? We are feeling uncomfortable feelings, stress, anxiety, trouble at school, trouble at home. We don't have the skills to deal with that, so we're going to just use substances, right? We can't only talk about the substance use, we also have to talk about the mental health piece. Studies show that about 1/3 of teenagers before they reach 18 will experience some type of mental health condition, depression, anxiety, body image, self-esteem issues, right? However mild or severe that presents itself, that's a different story, but many of your children might be experiencing some of these symptoms, right? Whether they have anxiety for a week or whether they have it for a year. It's all about our perspective and how we cope with it, right? It's not about the presence of, it's about kind of how we get through it or how we deal with whatever situation is kind of thrown at us. Some risk factors for drug use and abuse, I mentioned the early age, right? We want to postpone that age as much as possible. Any close friends that use, right? If people are using within the home, we're reinforcing potentially the culture that it's okay to use substances. So some tips for parents, I mentioned I'm definitely not a parent, so I'm not telling anyone what to do, just some friendly suggestions, right? Kind of transforming those old school beliefs or those old school perceptions of, as I mentioned, right? If I do it in my house, it's safe, I can control them, I can see what they're doing, right? But you might have just unknowingly kickstarted or jump-started somebody's abuse of substances, right? And not your child, it might be a friend, but one of them, most likely, their brain will have kind of triggered in a way that it might not should have been triggered, let's say. So teaching resistance skills, right? Ways to say no. We always emphasize this. And as I mentioned in the beginning, prevention is one of the #1 best protective factors in preventing substance use and abuse, right? So if we continue this conversation and we reinforce a zero tolerance, ideally, right, or most of the time, our kids will adapt to those norms and values. Have, as I mentioned, a zero tolerance, but make sure that your kids feel comfortable coming to you with things. Right, I had a dad tell me when we talked about kind of the social hosts law and the Good Samaritan law and things, he said, I would rather a kid come to me and I'm a little mad, right, maybe I ground them, I'll get over it, rather than go to their funeral. Right, I really encourage you to maybe have a similar dialogue with your kids. Right? You can call me at any time if you're in trouble. I want you to know that X, Y, and Z, these people, these resources are here if you find yourself in a crisis situation, if your friends are in a situation and they need help. Right? It's so much better to know and not need rather than to need and not have. So as I mentioned, the 6 life areas, right? They can be manifested in many different ways, but we just want to be hyper-aware of what our kids are doing and who they're involved with. Right? Emphasizing healthy coping skills. Just a healthy ways to get through life. Right? We're going to need coping skills throughout our whole life, so the development of them now and the utilization of them now will relate to them utilizing them in the future, right? And having really healthy, resilient outcomes when they go through stress and anxiety, rather than maybe some post-traumatic or negative outcomes. And here are our office numbers, as I mentioned, Westbury and Hopog. We're open Monday through Saturday, but you can reach a licensed therapist 24 hours a day. And here's just some additional services that we provide if they relate to anybody. One thing that we definitely do that's up there is Narcan trainings. So as I mentioned, Narcan is the opiate epidemic, antidote for opiate overdose, So if anybody knows anybody that is even prescribed an opiate, right, they're taking it as prescribed, I still encourage you to get trained in Narcan, right? You never know when you might find yourself in a situation. So we do that absolutely for free of charge as well. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
You mentioned before about the popcorn loans. Is that something where you can demonstrate that is noticeable in your sweat?
That's a good question. She just asked if the popcorn long through the vaping is noticeable through an X-ray. To be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure, but from the doctors that we work closely with, they've expressed to us that, as I mentioned, kids are coming in with these crazy symptoms of crazy allergies, kids who would never have allergies before, kids who are runners with intense asthma, and they're giving medications, right? Giving Flonase, giving Zyrtec, giving these over-the-counter and some prescription medications to combat these symptoms, right? Bronchial infections, all of these things, and they're realizing that the medications are not working because they're targeting one thing, and it's because of something else, if that makes sense. So they think that they're treating like an upper respiratory infection as a result of, let's say, the change in the weather, for example, but it's actually because of extreme irritation and fluid buildup from the vape product. So it's not working for that purpose, because it's not intended for that purpose, if that makes sense. I'm not too sure about that X-ray. I can check for you. Yeah. A lot of the vape juices come from other places where the regulations are much lax, much more. Other countries, other countries.
How are you so readily available to middle school children?
That's a good question. I would say if you drive on a major highway, you can spot at least a couple vape shops along the area. I know that their prosecutions for selling to kids underage, they're getting much more strict on the consequences for that. So less vape shops are selling to kids underage, but I would say one of the most common places they find the vape products is online. So one of the vape websites, I think it's Vape New York or something like that. You just have to click a box, check I am over 18. You don't have to enter your birth date, your license number, nothing. So they check I am over 18. And you know how like a great gift in the past would be like a Visa gift card, you let your kid get whatever they want. They're using those to buy the vape products online. And then when the vape comes, it's very discreet shipping, so it doesn't say that it's from a vape shop. It might say it's from, I don't know where it says it's from, but it wouldn't have that. So you would think, if your kid said, can I have a $100 gift card to get John a present, they order the present online and then it comes, he's like, oh, here, I got him a video game or something like that. And you really would maybe have no idea unless you physically open the box. So that's definitely something. I'm glad you brought that up. I would say most commonly bought online.
I'm just curious if you know what the current law is in New York now for marijuana. Because I see now on Jericho Turnpike there are people advertising CBD oils, and I think that's sort of related, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, so CBD is a little bit different. As far as New York State, it's prescribed in terms of for medical marijuana. Very, they're very stringent about it, if you will. Like not anyone can go to a doctor and say, I have a headache, I don't feel well, I'm gonna get medical marijuana. Usually it's people with terminal illness. And it's very, very strict. Like somebody can't even go to pick up another person's prescription, right? That person has to be there themselves. There's many different security checkpoints, so it's very, very well kept, if you will. The CBD is a little bit different. So CBD is another cannabinoid, but when it's extracted by itself, I kind of like to consider it in a way as like a natural Tylenol or Advil. If it's just CBD by itself, it's not psychoactive, meaning it will not affect the mind, it will affect the body. So in states where it's legal, they give CBD for kids and adults, let's say, with chronic illness, cancer, things like that. And it has a lot of beneficial body effects. The CBD, though, that we're seeing a lot around here, especially in the smoke shops, it's basically like fake CBD. So a lot of times that comes from overseas or other places as well, and it can be a little bit CBD, a little bit of fillers, or no CBD and a lot of fillers. So it's definitely a concern that we're seeing too. Kids that are going to these vape shops wanting to try CBD for whatever reason, and they're getting basically a synthetic form and having really bad repercussions from that.
Is there an age for children or to buy CBD?
So generally, you would have to be like 19, because it's commonly found in like smoke shops and things like that. It's 19, and I think it's 21 in some places. I think it's 21 in New York City, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, okay. That I thought that. I just didn't want to say if I wasn't sure. Yeah, Suffolk County is 21.
But it's the same product I've definitely seen it coming up as well in massage parlors and like some of the health food shop that go to this I was over the weekend. And it's like a whole CBD, it says no THC, and a whole like creams, oils, whatever. It didn't seem like there was any restriction on that.
So see.
There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so there are so many different CBD products. There's topicals, like you're saying, there's lotions, there's pills, there's oils that you put under your tongue, put in your hair. I mean, there's so many different kinds. I would say if sometimes if it's at like a health food store or something like that, it might. Yeah, but the CBD products though should still be regulated. Right, like in the smoke shops, if they try to buy a vaporized form of CBD, kind of like the vape tops with the THC, you can get those in CBD. Those would be like like at this year ID, you have to be 19 and 21 respectively to purchase it. I'm not sure about a cream. I think you could probably buy that at any age.
So, like 20-something-year-old, like us adults go to a vape shop and be ordinary and buy something THC.
No, not THC, but you can get a CBD product. So CBD, yeah, is a non-psychoactive product. A lot of people think it's like a safe alternative to smoking marijuana because they think it's from the marijuana plant. You know, it's kind of similar. It's not going to get me high, but it'll relax me. But the thing about that is you have to be careful of the strain. Like you're saying, at certain health food stores, they have organic, 100% CBD. You know it's verified. It's probably going to be extremely expensive. That's kind of at least one way that I like educate, if some food for thought, or a rule of thumb rather. If it's more expensive, generally it's probably organic, it's pure. If it's cheaper, like a $10 to $20 vape top, chances are that's not CBD at all. That could be anything that you're ingesting.
So, what's regulating the other fillers, particles, junk food,
Yeah, that's the thing. I know Juul is under a lot of heat right now because they're being sued. So going forward, they're probably going to alter some things. One of my friends actually on my way here sent me a news article of Juul. So actually, I'm not going to go to the flavors. So they have like 10 different flavors of the Juul pods, as well as the vape juices. One of the things that's kind of enticing because it's these crazy great flavors. So apparently Juul is allegedly, they're taking out of the stores the Juul pods that are the enticing flavors. So you can only buy Juul pods in the store that are, I believe, tobacco flavored and mint. Because they did studies, I guess, and they know that the kids are not buying tobacco or mint flavor. They're buying mango, they're buying berry, they're buying grape, I think is another one. So allegedly, they're taking this off the shelves. But that doesn't prevent them from going online, right? Because you can buy every Juul pod flavor online. Just because we can't get it in the store, we probably couldn't have anyway because we're not of age. So we can still go online to any of these vape shops and order the Juul pods online. Yeah.
I know that this presentation is going to be shown to the kids, and as the parents here, we're mortified and whatnot, but how do the kids react to this? Because I know that they just sit there and say, yeah, not me, it doesn't matter. I mean, how effective is this for the kids?
Yeah, that's a really good question. She asked about the effectiveness of the presentation. I would say, I don't want to say totally evenly split, but more so kids learn something from this. They're very shocked once the presentation is done because they're not aware of each part kind of that goes into the whole device that they're smoking, especially with regard to the Juul and the vaporization of marijuana. They're kind of, the perception of risk is so low initially, right, because they're uneducated or unaware of what is actually going into these devices. And then we break down all of the pieces, they really get a better idea of what they're doing. I would say the biggest thing that, one of the biggest takeaways for the kids, one of the biggest points after I make it that, I hear like gasps or silence because they're kind of, the wheels are spinning, is the fact that the one Juul pod equals 20 cigarettes. I would say when I asked them how many of you did not know that, 90% of them raised their hand. So that tells me that, let's say 90% of them are vaping, right? 90% of them are vaping without knowing what they're vaping. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is the coil. Right, the aspect of the coil and the metals, the nanoparticles that I mentioned, they're really not, they're not thinking that far into it. So when I mentioned that, they're really taken aback. Yeah.
a little off topic, but do you, your company, see a decrease of like smoking marijuana on in our area, or like is it enough with this? Do you think it's not doing other drugs?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say this is definitely the biggest issue across every school district that I'm in. vaping just general nicotine juice, and vaping the marijuana. So it's not necessarily the regular marijuana they're smoking, most of them are smoking this oil form. I was just speaking with some of the administration here, and a few years back, I would say the biggest issue, if I could personally add my 2 cents into it, would be like prescriptions. Like Xanax was a really big issue for a while, and now we're seeing a much less of a percentage in students using prescription pills like Xanax, much more vaping. Again, vaporized form of nicotine or vaporized marijuana. Yeah.
So, you say that vaping is addictive, like cigarette smoking. How do you go about treating people with the procedure, the light smoking patch, or the cutting? Obviously, let's say if he comes to a presentation or they're shocked and they want to stop, it sounds like they can just put it down, because now they're addicted to it. What is the, maybe can you give us a little bit of insight of what the procedure is? Is there like a patch that you use for smoking?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a small percentage of people that are able to stop, but they definitely experience withdrawal symptoms. So maybe some anxiety, maybe some irritability, maybe some light depression, sleeplessness, things like that. But I would say for the majority who want to quit, they would have to use maybe a smoking cessation aid, so like a patch.
That works the same way,
Mhm.
it's the same kind of treatment.
Absolutely. So the patch or the nicotine gum, definitely. As I mentioned, one of our youngest, not our direct clients, but a client we made a referral to, a 9-year-old. He's on the patch right now.
And you've had success with that.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Is there anyone working on, like, promoting or lobbying for legislation?
I can only really speak for like LICADD and the agencies we're involved in, but there's an agency called Drug Free Long Island, or a nonprofit rather. They're mostly located out of Massapequa and the surrounding areas, but they will go to any community, do similar prevention and education. The woman that is kind of like the CEO or the founder, Janice, she has a task force of young people that she works with that are not only peer educators, so they get trained and then they go out and educate their peers in the community, but they also are kind of like indirect like spies, if you will. Like they go to the vape shops and they try to buy products. If they are sold a product underage, they get cited. So Drug Free Long Island works with the kids in the community as well as like the police departments in Nassau County to prosecute these vape shops. So I just know of Drug Free Long Island specifically, but I know there are so many other parent coalitions, nonprofits that this is definitely an issue for them too. If anyone doesn't have any other questions, and if you think of some later, like I said, by all means, please feel free to call LICADD at any time. I'd be happy to help anybody out. Thank you so much again for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you to Lauren for bringing all this information and knowledge to us. Some of it I know is very eye-opening and scary. Are there students vaping in Jonathan High School? Absolutely. We would try to estimate based upon what the statewide survey results show that about 20% of students vape regularly. That's the statewide data research. How many of them are doing that on campus? That's really hard to say. As Lauren presented, the smoke dissipates very quickly, is very difficult to detect, and if the students really want to accomplish vaping, they probably can find a forum to do that. You should know as parents, there are very strict consequences on school grounds for vaping.
What are those consequences?
Yes, if a student is caught vaping in school, and it's happened both at the high school and the middle school, or in possession of vaping products, they are suspended out of school. It is a very strict consequence, and it's parallel to what we would have done for smoking, which is not something we currently see. It's a challenge, though, for school administrators and teachers. When students would smoke in the bathroom, that would be easy to detect. You smell it, you go in, you can tell it's happening. If a student wants to find a private area and attempts to vape, the smoke dissipates very quickly, it's often without scent, and it's very difficult to detect. There's some technology being developed that helps us out. where the water concentration in the air changes when someone is vaping and it sends off alarm like a smoke alarm, but that hasn't been perfected yet. It's being piloted in some schools. We're watching carefully. If we determine that it's something we think would be an effective deterrent here, we'll use it. But that's something that is still developing. But yes, this is an issue that has been addressed in our classrooms, our hallways, our offices, both here and at the middle school, which is frightening. I'm happy you're all here. It's a way that you recognize that it's something that could impact your household. Hopefully this is information that you'll share with your friends and neighbors. We did videotape the presentation. It'll be on the website probably by the close of business tomorrow. If you want to reference some of the things you saw and point your neighbors and friends to the website, it will be there. But know that it's something we're very diligent about. We want to make sure our students are aware of the dangers of these habits and the gateway potential that vaping has to more serious substance abuse issues that aren't addressed, and we can't let that happen. Opioid addiction is a state and national crisis, and we don't want it to become pervasive in the outlet school district. So we will take every measure possible to make sure that both our students and you, our community, are aware of the potential dangers. And we think of it like the starfish theory. If you know the story about the young boy who was walking along the seashore, and there are thousands of starfish washed up onto the beach, and an old man sees him picking one at a time and throwing it back into the ocean. And the old man says to the boy, "Why are you doing that? You can't possibly make a difference. There are thousands of starfish on the beach. You're doing one at a time." And he picks up one, he throws it into the ocean, and he says, "Well, it made a difference to this one." So if you're wondering why we do presentations like this and why we do sacrifice instructional time away from our core academics to teach about dangers of substance abuse and addiction, is if we feel if we've reached one child and had them put in a position where they make a healthy choice in their life, we've done our jobs one at a time. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. Other questions?
My concern with this is like it's great to have acceptance and have parents come to pull the kids out of class so they can watch videos. A lot of them think it's funny. I have a daughter and a niece that are like freshmen. A lot of them think this is funny, and the kids are not that clever. They're from what my daughter and my niece have told me. They're people that are vaping. They're doing it on their way to class. It's not a secret who's vaping. They think it's funny. Just like sick people, they can watch a video like this and say, "Oh my God, I didn't know AIDS was going to affect me so much as long-term effects." But it's just like cigarettes. We know cigarettes are going to have, even cause cancer, etc. But people still do it. The kids right now think this is cool and think it's funny and it's easily accessible and it's cheap. And with the younger kids, they have brothers and sisters in the high school that are doing it and that are going to let them do it too. So it's like, I don't really think just a one-time assembly is going to do that.
No, you're 100% right, and you've done a great job articulating the challenge that we're faced with, but you're absolutely correct that a one-time assembly is the start.
And I don't think suspension, like 2 or 3 days out of school, is the answer to.
What would you suggest?
I'm sorry?
What would be your suggestion?
I don't know, honestly. I mean, they did mention to me that someone was expelled for it. But again, well, it wasn't only vaping, it was like a combination of things. But they think, and these are 14-year-old kids, they think it's funny. As they're telling me this, they're laughing because they think it's funny. They don't think that this is something serious. Oh, the person's gonna have to repeat that grade. They're not thinking like this is a serious thing. And like maybe for athletes, a lot of kids are very serious with their athletics. Could it be possible that they do get tested? And if they're tested, they're off the team?
No, that would be against the laws of the state of New York.
Okay.
But if a parent elects to test their own child and bar those type of activities,
But that's the thing. I think a lot of us are naive to what's going on. Really and truly, a lot of us are naive to what our kids are doing. And a lot of us don't want, we trust our kids too much to think, oh, my daughter or my son isn't going to do this. They know they're going to make better choices. They're stupid teenagers and they're going to do what they're planning on doing, and they're not
Thank you. And even kids that have, and again, I'm just going based off what my daughter and my niece have told me, kids have thought. And their parents are like, oh, we didn't know. But how do you, where's your kid getting all this money to get all of this crap from?
So I want to address a couple of things that you said, and I appreciate it. Number one, we don't believe one-time assemblies are a solution to any problem. And the systemic learning that takes place, the assembly is part of it. The curriculum in a health classroom is a part of it. What's covered in a science class is another part of it. And we use presentations like from our resources at LICADD to supplement what's already being instructed in the classroom. Although Lauren and her team will bring new information to our students as part of their assembly, it'll be far from the first time they've been in an instructional setting, learning about the dangers of vaping, learning about the dangers of substance abuse. Suspension is the most severe consequence that a school can impart on a student. We don't have a tool in the toolkit that is more severe than suspending from school. But what parents need to understand about suspension is that enters the school into a partnership with the parent to say, we are telling you there has been a serious infraction that requires a good deal of your attention. And while your child has been suspension, we are giving you and affording you this time to make an impact as a parent on this is not okay. Different parents handle that differently. And some students, when we know we have to have a difficult conversation with a parent about a suspension, it's going to be the only conversation we have. And by the reaction of some parents based upon a suspension, we know we'll see that child again for an additional suspension shortly down the line. Parent training is an aspect of education. This is a form of parent training. Thank you for attending it. But unfortunately, we are limited in the impact that we can have with particular students unless it's a partnership with the family and the parents. And the students that we meet with the greatest level of success have a great support system at home. And some of the students that we have to spend far more time with and use more of our resources with are those that don't have that same level of support in the home environment.
Would the school ever consider saying a 5-day OSS could be some child's dream, or would they consider doing a 5-day in-school suspension, or is that not?
It depends on the infraction because we need to be consistent in our implementation of the code of conduct. But you are correct that it's a bit of a paradox that the punishment for misbehaving in school is missing school. Some students do prefer not to be here. So we try to make sure that when we are using that part of the consequences that we have, it's being used effectively. Mr. Brzezinski and I were just having a conversation today because we're faced with a particular challenge. How there are districts that do explore things like PM school and those types of programs for students who can't attend because of their lack of ability to conform to the code of conduct during the regular day, but a perhaps more structured environment after school hours is something they benefit from. There are certainly districts that have such a setting in place, typically much larger districts that have a greater need for that student population. We have some obstacles to overcome to make it work here, the first being transportation. But there are conversations that we do have regulated to say, suspension doesn't seem to be the solution for this child or these children. What else can we do to further support them? Absolutely.
Just in terms of what we do at LICADD, the
The
school.
camera will not.
I understand the school is responsible for the disciplinary action, and I hear what a lot of the parents are saying in terms of the reparative action, if you will. And by all means, I'm letting you know now, if you don't already know, you can always refer students to LICADD, and if LICADD is not appropriate, we can make the connection to a treatment provider that is appropriate. So maybe the disciplinary action would be an in-school or out-of-school suspension, but in addition to that, maybe complementing it with some psychoeducation or some counseling and referrals within the mental health and substance community. So that's definitely another option to supplement.
Thank you, Lauren. And we do believe in restorative justice as well. We do believe in using suspensions as an educational tool. There have been situations since I arrived as superintendent where students for disciplinary reasons are sent to my office for a hearing. Principals have the authority to suspend students up to 5 days. I have the authority to suspend students indefinitely, as long as the commissioner will uphold my ruling as to the rationale for doing so. Sometimes the infractions are of a very serious nature. If a student is suspended for a school year, as an example, I will tell them in September, you are suspended through the end of June. They're provided with instructional services at home through home instruction, which is private tutoring. But I will say, however, if you meet these following conditions, I will reconsider your return to school at a far earlier date. And it is often counseling, community service, involvement in charitable organizations, showing me and showing the district and showing the family that they've made a commitment to corrective behavior. And it is fortunate that on most occasions where students are given the opportunity to take that corrective action in order to come back to school faster, they do. I've been fortunate in that experience.
If a student is suspended by the school, say for 5 days, does the school, when applies to a college, does the school have to notify that as part of the transcript?
It's a great question.
When my daughter was applying, it was common habit that if you're disciplined or suspended, does the school, as a deterrent to
I'll tell you.
tell us what's our children?
I don't want to give away every secret, but I don't mind sharing it with you. That we do use the college application as the dangling carrot. When a student makes a mistake, whether it be in the middle school years or early in their high school career, and a disciplinary action like a 5-day suspension is on their permanent record, a conversation that the building principal is definitively authorized to have with that student is to say, this happened in 9th grade, it was a mistake. We hope you learn from it. If you can keep your disciplinary record clean for 10th grade, 11th grade, when it's time for you to send your college application, we will check the no box and expunge your record based upon your good behavior over the last number of years. Don't tell your children that, just right. Any other questions I can speak to? Well, then I will once again thank you very much for your attendance tonight. We appreciate how seriously you take this topic. And do please do me the favor, if you felt the information that was shared with you tonight was of value, point one other person in the direction of our website where the video will be posted later tomorrow. Thank you very much. We will see you again soon. Happy Thanksgiving if I don't see you before then.